Picture every dollar of wealth in America, every house, stock, business, bank account, in one giant pile. Now split the country into groups. The richest 1% hold about 30% of the whole pile. The bottom half, 160 million people, hold about 2 to 3%. Translation: the top 1% own roughly as much as the entire bottom 90% combined. That's not a typo, and it's not an accident. There's an engine that concentrates wealth at the top automatically, and once you see it, you'll get why just work hard was never going to close that gap. Let's break it down. Honestly, including where economists actually throw hands over the numbers. We talk about the wealth gap like it's a vibe. It's not, it's a measurable distribution and it's extreme. But here's what most takes get wrong. They make it about income, about paychecks. Wealth isn't income. Income is the river. Wealth is the reservoir, what you own after the bills. And ownership behaves totally differently from earning. You can have a decent salary and basically zero wealth, while someone with a modest salary but a bag of assets quietly pulls away from you every year. They literally do nothing. The wealth gap isn't mainly about who earns. It's about who owns. So let's look at who owns what, why it snowballs, and the honest fight over how bad it really is. These numbers come from economists Emmanuel Saez and Gabriel Zucman, the Federal Reserve's own distributional data, and I'll give you the serious academic challenge to them too. Both sides. Let's go. Let's slap real shares on it, straight from the Fed's data. The top 1% hold around 30% of all household wealth. The next 9%, the rest of the top 10, hold roughly another 30 plus. So the top 10% own about 2/3 of everything. That leaves a third for the other 90%. And inside that, the bottom half of America owns just 2 to 3%. Let that sit. Half the country splitting 2 or 3%. So, the top 1% owns about as much as the bottom 90%, isn't outrage bait. It's just the Fed's spreadsheet being brutal. Here's the engine, and it's about what kind of wealth each group holds. For the bottom 90%, almost all their wealth is in one thing: their home. For the top 1%, it's businesses and stocks. The Fed finds the top 1% own more than half of all stocks and mutual funds in the country. Why's that matter? Because stocks and businesses grow faster than houses. Over the long run, the stock market has built wealth way faster than home values. So the group that owns stocks automatically pulls away from the group that owns a house, every year without anyone lifting a finger. The rich aren't just richer. They own the faster-growing kind of wealth. That's the quiet snowball. It's not mainly bigger paychecks. It's owning the assets that compound. There's a famous version of this from the economist Thomas Piketty. In his 2014 book, he squished it into one little inequality. R is greater than G. R is the return on capital, what owned wealth earns. G is the growth of the overall economy, basically what wages track. His argument: when the return on owning stuff R beats the growth of the economy G, which it usually has, then wealth grows faster than wages, and the people who already own stuff pull ahead of the people who work generation after generation. Inherited money snowballs. Economists argue about how iron a law it is, but the gut of it matches the data we just saw. Own the compounding asset, win the long game by default. Now, I promised honest, and this is where serious people genuinely disagree. Saez and Zucman's dramatic numbers got challenged. In 2024, two economists, Auten and Splinter, published work in the Journal of Political Economy arguing that once you properly count taxes, government transfers, and how pensions are measured, the rise in inequality is a lot smaller than Saez and Zucman claim. Saez and Zucman pushed back hard. The fight's technical: what counts as wealth, how to value Social Security and pensions, who really pays taxes, and it is not settled. So the honest takeaway, the headline, top 1% holds roughly as much as the bottom 90%, is robust. You see it in the Fed's own data, not just one camp. But the exact size and how fast it got worse is legitimately contested. Anyone handing you one confident number is overselling. Concentration: real and large. Precise size: live debate. Both true. Strip out the cage match and the practical lessons the same either way. The wealthy aren't winning mainly on salary, they're winning because they own the compounding assets, and you, statistically, own a house at best and nothing that grows at worst. So the move isn't to resent the pile. It's to change which side of the engine you're on. Every dollar you shift from pure spending into owning compounding assets, index funds, equity, a business, moves you slowly from the side wealth leaves to the side it piles up on. You probably won't catch the 1%. But the gap between owning nothing that compounds and owning something is, over a lifetime, the difference between being stuck in that bottom 50 sliver and climbing out. The system rewards owners. So become one, however small. So, the top 1% own about as much as the bottom 90, the bottom half splits 2 or 3%, and the engine isn't mainly paychecks. It's that the rich own the stocks and businesses that compound while everyone else owns a house or nothing. The one idea, wealth concentrates because it compounds, and it only compounds for people who own. Work earns income. Ownership earns wealth. Get on the ownership side. If this clarified the gap, subscribe, honest version, the academic brawl included. See you next one.